Have you ever wondered how to build a job board that actually makes money? Lars Peter Svane quietly built a portfolio of niche sites that employers love. And he did it before niche job boards were even a thing. In this episode, he breaks down the exact blueprint that he used to go from side hustle to full-time founder and what he'd do differently today. Let's dive in. Lars, thank you for joining me today.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good, thank you. So, getting into it, you have built a portfolio of niche job boards long before it became quite trendy. What was your kind of eureka moment, your aha moment that kicked off EuroJobsites?
I guess it was a mix of wanting to do some sort of media business and not really having any super clear idea what it was, and then thinking, jobs. It's something that's being advertised. It could be a way to monetize a media business, and I've always been following, classified of all sorts of kinds, and I was living in a market myself. I grew up in Denmark, but I lived in Brussels doing like kind of policy jobs. And there, lots of my friends were looking for that kind of jobs. And there weren't that many job sites back then. And I thought, maybe I can make a list of jobs. My co-founder, Richard, helped build what became really a very niche job site. We built that for a few years, and then we thought, okay, this is tens of thousands of people. Let's try and see if we can make a business out of this. And we could both leave our jobs and think that we could probably come back to that if it didn't work out. So, but we wanted to try and be entrepreneurs, and we thought that we had something.
And that was back in 2006, am I right?
It's actually even longer. Yeah, it was. Yeah, 2006 is when we left our jobs. Yeah, it took a few years for us to be brave enough to leave our jobs. So you could say we were lucky in the sense that we were able to kind of build this in the weekends and evenings, and not really maybe try that hard until we thought, okay, now the audience is so big that we have to try. And yeah, we were lucky as well to have a few friends who could help us. There was a Scottish guy who helped me actually reply to the emails and stuff when I was still working. And Richard's wife's she's got a background in one of the big accountancies, so she volunteered to do some of the billing and stuff. So we kind of had a small business put together just like that, and it was a very small niche that we started with, and maybe we were actually surprised that it was bigger than we thought. So there weren't really any competing media doing just jobs, so we kind of by default almost became the one everyone looked at. So we owned that market for a while.
It's fantastic. I mean, that's it's going back to the days before people weren't really talking about niche job boards back in, the early to mid noughties. So you definitely were a trendsetter to say the least. To say the least.
Yeah, I take the compliment, but it's
No, take it absolutely.
I think it's also what a lot of people saying, like go for a very narrow niche to start with, and then you have a better chance of being number one in your niche, and then hopefully there will be some adjacencies or some similar things that you can grow into. And yeah, maybe we hadn't thought that completely through, but that ended up becoming research science jobs, and later pharma engineer, and climate, which was actually called energy in the beginning. And then we bought space careers 2 years ago from a French founder who was in his 60s. So he had kind of wanted to sell it, and we thought it fit quite well with our other job sites. So from a few years in, we kind of thought we had something like a template. We had as time went along, we had a few people working with us in a back office. We had one database, one system, one email marketing system, and we thought we could use that for other niches. And with varying degrees of success, we tried a few things that didn't work as well. We had an economist job site. We've had a lawyer job site that didn't. Maybe the lawyer's not as international as I had been brainwashed to think in Brussels, but
Yeah.
we tried to build more job sites with these very narrow niches in areas where we thought the mobility of people like scientists was quite high, because
So that was going to be a really interesting question. Well, hopefully an interesting question that I was going to ask you, which was exactly that, which was, with so many kind of niche job sites, that you've tried, and some have been successful and some have been failed. How do you decide what niche is worth launching into?
it's a very good question. I would say what I already said. If you identifying the kind of white hot center that some of these marketplace gurus say, I would say something that you care about yourself. And someone said it, like you have to go to the weddings and the funerals, and among the people in your niche, you have to love it a bit, and also just accept that you're going to spend a lot of time on this. So I think, especially if you're in the marketing and sales side of things, it has to be something that you like and enjoy doing, and accept that by having a kind of unfair advantage of knowing the sector better than most people, you understand the quirkiness of what are the categories, what are the job titles, what are the employers. I think a fragmented market lends itself well to a job board. And of course, in our case, we thought something, if we want to do something international, we wanted something where the skills were somewhat transferable, which might not actually really be the case for some of the original job site skills, because it's very oriented towards language and legal and things like that, which are more difficult to move to another country and do in this mosaic of European languages. And of course, there's also the marketplace. Are there any big players already that will come and destroy you if you try and enter their market? So if you choose a relatively small niche that doesn't look like it's going to be too attractive for some mega guys next to you, that will probably mean that you can build it up at least the first year or two without being, outcompeted, really.
Yeah. So thinking about
yes.
that kind of first year or two, when you first launch a new niche job board, and you go to market, what would be that kind of first 12-month market entry plan? How would you first kind of enter a new market with a new niche?
I would say, you could build it up from nothing with pretty much offering access to the audience for free to some employers that you either know, or where you know that there is an unfilled need of a particular marketplace just for that type of skills. And then you do need to do a little bit of this marketplace chicken and egg stuff, where you get some people on the platform because there are some jobs. Try and tempt some people to list some jobs with you, either because it's free or because it's a way to reach an audience that they otherwise couldn't reach. And I think by then sharing those jobs, either with, of course, you can piggyback on social media in the beginning. That's probably what you would do if you launched it today. But I think very quickly it turns out to be also about getting those people who had those particular skills to come back, and also engaging with some of the people who had more experience in the niche, so that you're not only catering to the beginners and the desperate interns who are applying for 20 jobs every week, because that may actually also become a little bit annoying for the employers.
Mm.
You might have some, that could be also a problem in terms of international stuff, where you have a lot of people who might not have the work permit, or they might have an interest in the field, but they don't have all the skills, and they're just kind of applying for everything. So you need to find that balance between access to an interesting group of candidates, where I think that employers also need to accept there will be some speculative implications if you're
Of course.
in any kind of field, but especially in like IT engineering. It's you're kind of an editor of a little newspaper in some ways. You need to shape the audience, and I think doing it in a niche that you care for yourself makes it easier to do and get it right.
Yeah, I like that.
So
I like that.
yeah,
So having a bit of passion about the niche as well, rather than just entering it for the sake of business, is definitely a key to success, you'd say.
I think so, and also just that maybe also helps you to automatically find some of the partners for this. So you can do, we've been some of the successes we've had was from partnering with other media in the sector who didn't have job ads on their platform, or conference organizers, or anyone who needed audience for whatever they were doing. It could even be other kinds of events, where we'd say, okay, can we, if we advertise your event and we'll give you 3,000 pens, can you give them to the people who come to the event, or something crazy like that?
Yeah.
In the beginning, we were completely unknown, really. So it was all about like building a brand. And you could say that we learned maybe from the first niche which things kind of worked for us and which ones didn't. And then we thought, okay, let's try that on the other niches. And well, some worked, some didn't. And of course, a recruitment fair is kind of an obvious place to go for some of these things. You can find a specialized recruitment fair that's in the niche that you're trying to get into or become an important job site in. That's not a bad thing. But it could also be an industry conference, or anything really. It's your imagination that sets the limit, really. Yeah, and maybe also trying to think ahead, what's going to be the most decisive stuff in the next 3, 5, 10 years. If you think, just looking at that kind of very politics oriented job site we started with, I mean, in the beginning, I think maybe 10% of the jobs were in like environment, energy, climate policy, but now it's like 25%. And that's one of the reasons we later thought we could make an energy job site, maybe taking some audience from our existing engineer site and some of those climate, energy, environment experts. And that became EuroClimate jobs.
That's super interesting.
It's a
That's really
weird
interesting.
combination of skills, but yeah.
Yeah. No, so that's really interesting. So you've got that niche, that that politics, policy, kind of site, but what you're seeing is a growing trend in a specific type of industry, or niche within a niche, and splintering off to create almost another niche based on that. That's super interesting. Really, really interesting. Um, so we've kind of talked about that kind of that initial 12 months, that first go to market, doing a lot of kind of added value stuff, giving away things for free, going to careers fairs, really building the brand. When you're ready to start monetizing, and you've obviously, I would think, have done your fair share of experimentation when it comes to different monetization models. What's been the most consistently best performing monetization model across your board? I suppose, which one's been a complete flop as well? You said you've definitely learned
Yeah.
from some bad mistakes, but
I
it'd be
mean, you
great
could
to
say in the
understand what worked.
beginning, yeah, we had some. There is a geographical focus to the first job site, Euro Brussels, where we thought, okay, maybe you can also make money from things that people who want to reach those guys who are looking for those jobs in Brussels. So we did manage to. I mean, we did all sorts of banner advertising as well, and newsletter advertising, because we're sending like thousands of emails out. And I would say in the beginning, we thought we'll try a bit of everything. And then, as I would say, anything to do with education seems to work well with job sites. It's also because, I mean, my co-founder was kind of laughing at me when I said, when people are on a job site, they're in career improvement mood. And I think that's true. You know, you're looking at a job, you're thinking like, I wish I could apply for that, but I maybe don't have completely all the skills that I need for that. Maybe I should consider doing a master's in this, or it might not have to be as much as that. You could also just say, well, let me do an AI course, or let me do, it depends a bit on the job site. We're talking about what could be relevant. So that in the beginning, that was a real revenue stream for us. But I mean, looking in the rear view mirror, I would probably say that it's the jobs that you really need to monetize, be able to monetize the jobs. If you can't do that, then I'm not sure it's a long-term business. And we've always been trying to avoid having a kind of a flow of jobs from some buying database. We've been trying to add relevant jobs ourselves, and also we've been using freemium to let either universities or NGOs or internships be posted for free. So there were always lots of jobs, and that meant we could build up an audience, and that audience in turns, that becomes the product if you're a bit tough about it, because that's what the employers want to reach. And I mean, even if in the beginning, a lot of those are kind of maybe universities or organizations that might be a little bit obscure, or research centers and stuff like that. I mean, we had a lot of success with these sort of Euro organizations because we came from that. So we had European meteorological satellites, weather forecasts, European space, European molecular biology laboratory, all these things. That's also what helped us into some of the other niches without starting completely from scratch. But eventually we would then convert that into having some more industry-oriented customers in like pharma companies, engineering companies, aerospace companies, etc., that would say, okay, this is a very interesting audience for us, maybe not for all their jobs, but for some of their jobs. So, as the audience grows and you analyze what are the skills we have in our database, you can kind of use your imagination to think, who are the customers who would be interested in having access to these guys in one place, instead of going to a generalist job board where they would get a lot more irrelevant applications. I think that's also, as a niche board, you do have to accept that you are competing to some degree with the generalist job boards, and I mean, LinkedIn is a big factor in anything to do with job boards these days. So you have to, show that you have access to this group of experienced job seekers who may not be actively looking, or they just keep an eye on the job market, maybe occasionally. But by having a very specific type of information that's relevant for them, they probably they stay subscribed to your job alerts, even if they're not really looking for a job right now. And that means that you might give an employer access to those guys because they're interested in the jobs on the platform.
No, I get that totally. That's really interesting. So, and you're right. Even though somebody might not be active in the market, keeping in touch with them, showing them the opportunities means that when they are active, they know where to come. So, from a monetization perspective, across this series, I've talked to people about different, time-based advertising, cost per application, cost per click, all those kind of things. What's been the model that's worked best for you? Has it been duration based? Has it been success based? How has it worked for you?
I mean, you could say, we would even hesitate to call it duration based, because it's the moment the job goes on the site, whether it's on there for 2 weeks or 6 weeks, I think the results don't differ that much. You might get a few more applications in the last 4 weeks, and okay, they may be some of the more qualified guys, but the fact that it goes on the site, in our case, it also means that it goes out in the job alert, it goes out in the newsletter, what have you. We share it on social media. We got LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups. We're even sharing some of the stuff on other groups, and we got a few partnerships with other media. We got our own blog about one or two things. And that means, people are paying to put an ad on the site to access that audience. And yes, you could say that maybe we could also do a cost per click model. But I think the fact that we built up this very specialist audience on each of the sites means that there is a value to it. I mean, we still have relatively modest prices compared to some of the big guys like Stepstone, or I think even LinkedIn ends up costing a lot more, even though it may seem cheap in the beginning. I mean, we've all got our pricing models, but I think you would mostly get relatively relevant applications, at least from our sites. But that also means that it feels fair that even if you are not getting thousands of applications, you don't actually really need that for these very specialized positions. You need 10 or 20 relevant applications, and it actually takes a lot of time to filter out, weed off the wrong ones. And I think that can actually be a real problem with platforms like bigger platforms that are less focused, to be quite frank. I mean, it's time consuming.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that, and that's the benefit of a niche board. Ultimately, is a more relevant applicant, more relevant audience. Absolutely. I'm interested in going back to your comment earlier about acquiring a space niche job board. So for the space industry, a lot of the audience that we have, they're founders, they're operators, they're building up a niche job board, and some of them potentially might be interested in the possibility of selling their job boards in the future. How do you go about valuing a job board? How do you work out, maybe it'd be a great idea just to talk through, that acquisition process that you went through with the space job board.
Sure. I mean, it was a relatively small board, but in a very focused niche with a kind of European focus, which we thought fit reasonably well with what we were doing. And it was a brand that was somewhat known in that sector. So, and it's been around for 20 years. So this means that I think there was some brand value, but ultimately we did do an analysis of, what kind of data do we have here? Is it a substantial number of email subscribers? Are there any CVs in a database that have been collected in a way that comply with the GDPR rules? You also have to, one thing is the data you have, and another question is, can you actually use that data? Of course, if you're like a one-man show and you collected some data, you might not have complied with all the rules. If you're a company, you might have to become a little bit more careful. So that was part of the analysis, and that was, in the end, there's a bit of a negotiation there. Like, do we think that this is going to work? What does the market look like? We had, you could say, specialized in some relatively narrow niches in the first place. So we thought that this would also fit in reasonably well with some of the things we're doing already with the space and engineering and tech. So there were definitely some synergies, and that gives it some value for us. But I would also say that if you look at the number of, could say, subscribers that actually open the emails and stuff, and are they, who are they? The more analysis, the more data you would be able to give about, the experience that these people have. Are they part of a group that are relatively difficult to find somewhere else? What are the alternatives? I mean, in the end, that is what it's about. Do you have tens of thousands of space engineers with 10 years or 15 years experience? That's much more interesting than 5,000 people who just graduated last year, because
Yeah.
they're easier to access through maybe cooperating with a few universities. So I think that's also something that, it is tempting to say, great, we can get a lot of graduates, but there is a bit of, you could say, the trade-off maybe in any kind of niche sector, that the most difficult to get candidates are often the most experienced ones. And they tend to be the ones who already have a job, and often a relatively well-paid job. So they're less likely to be active job seekers. So you need to
Yeah.
tempt them with some pretty senior, interesting jobs to keep them as subscribers. And that's one of the reasons we thought that this one was interesting. It could have been, there could have been more candidates on it. It could have made it even more valuable. It
Yeah.
could have been maybe more senior candidates, but it was actually, that was one of the reasons we thought it was really interesting. There were some people with a lot of experience who were
Yeah.
looking at this. I think that's typical as well for these niches, that there's maybe even an overlap between the candidates on the one hand and the people looking to hire.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if you're someone in the space industry, if you've got 10, 15 years experience, maybe more, you're probably going to be involved in some of the recruitment decisions in that sector as well.
Yeah.
So that actually kind of becomes self-fulfilling prophecy a bit when you can build up an audience like that and you can hold on to it for a while. Then knowing that these people are not just candidates, but also perhaps involved in recruitment in that sector, and that applies for any sector really.
Yes.
So that I think that's a good hint to someone trying to build up a substantial audience. Do you have any unfair advantages, like with access to a particular group of people in a sector you love? And do you want to hang out with those people and build that insider knowledge a little bit? Because what are you really selling? You're also selling. It's a meta company in a weird way, because we've got like maybe 300, 400 different companies using a site like that over a year, and that makes it easier for the job seeker as well. It's served a little bit more on a silver platter, and see, something from the European Space Agency, maybe that's kind of obvious, but there may be some smaller companies that you haven't heard about, but that could have some really interesting jobs. And that's, in a way, it's similar to the niche we came from, with many very small NGOs, industry associations, consultancies, law firms, etc., from the outset. And that becomes the core of the niche, and then you can maybe find adjacencies to that niche that like to use that marketplace as well.
Yeah. That's that crossover that we were talking about earlier, which is just super interesting. But I found that really interesting because traditionally, a lot of companies, when they go through a potential acquisition, they tend to be valued on their revenue, and I think that what you're trying to say here is that job boards, a lot of the time, it's not just about the revenue; it's about the audience and about what you can offer to that niche, and whether that audience is high quality, relevant, as well. So there's kind of a slightly different factor to look at when it comes to the economics of job board.
I mean, it depends very much on the niche you're in, I guess. But and also that would maybe it does depend on that, who a potential buyer would be. So it's difficult to say something super general about that. But I remember going to a few of these job board conferences and listening to presentations about the valuation of like Manpower, Adecco, Randstad. And you're looking at these enormous bars on the bar charts, and you're looking at the job boards. And, of course, that's partly because they can maybe get a percentage of an annual salary from people who they placed out. But okay, they have some costs as well, but they're running a business which is enormous compared to the advertising cost of putting a job ad on. So it's not that surprising, but that could maybe also be a hint to who the potential buyers could be if they can see. Okay, here I got access to a niche I'm already in, and these guys have built up an audience of a huge number of very specialized people from that area that could at least give you a hint to who could be the potential buyers if you're thinking of that. I think it's not that surprising in the end when you think about it. But
no, really interesting.
yeah, I mean,
really
some sectors are if there's growth in a sector, that plays a role as well. I mean, if I had an AI job board with lots of people who actually have the skills that people are looking for and can't find anywhere else, that would probably be worth a lot more than a job board in a sector that's declining. But having said that, you need to use your imagination as well. I mean, I think a lot of those automotive engineers that might be in trouble now, they might actually have some of the skills that are used in the defense market. And you came from telecommunication yourselves. You told me before we started the call. I mean, if you're a radio frequency engineer, that could actually be quite a good skill in space engineering.
Good to know. Good to know. It's only been 25 years since I did it, so it's there might be a future career in space for me yet.
So I mean,
great.
In a way, you need to use your imagination to think about who are those candidates and who are they valuable to. That's part of your job, I guess, as a job board manager.
Yeah, absolutely, and it proves that you really get your niche as well, and you understand the skills required. You understand what hiring managers are looking for. Super important, to make sure that that you can offer those kind of strategic relationships with your clients to show that sometimes you need to look outside that generic profile.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
adding value in that way.
Exactly.
Because that's something they might not have thought about themselves, or there might be some unexpected applicants if you use that platform, which gives you access to thousands of people. And that's what a marketplace is all about in the end.
No, absolutely. So Lars, that's been really, really interesting. I like to finish these interviews with one question, which is about looking back on your career and your experience and your history in the kind of job board place. If you were launching a new niche job board today, or you were talking to somebody who was just about to launch a new niche job board, going back over your experience over the last 20 years, what would you do differently today than you have done in the past? What would be your top 3 pieces of advice to a new job board founder?
I guess I said, go for something where you feel you have an unfair advantage, where you have access to an audience that's difficult to find, and then maybe be a bit ruthless but be also hard on yourself in thinking, does the market really need this? And go out, force yourself to go out and have some product interviews with people in the business to talk about what are they using now, and if we had an audience like this. And let's face it, it's relatively easy these days to mock up a site where you could at least show something that looks like what it would look like, and then show that to some people that you maybe know from that industry or area that you want to launch it in, and really just try and really be tough on yourself in the kind of lean startup way. There was a book called Nail It and Scale It.
Yeah.
You need to nail it before you spend your many months and lots of money on doing this. I mean, of course, you can use something like JBoard or a competitor to build a site relatively quickly, and then maybe that. Yeah, I'm kind of making one big point here, but I think do something in a niche where you actually enjoy spending time with the people who are in the niche and where you have a bit of an insider knowledge. And I think maybe we didn't completely adhere to our own. I mean, we ventured into a few things where we thought, oh, great, we have this audience, let's try that as well. And some of the things worked out better than others. And maybe we spent a little bit too much time not admitting to ourselves that this is not really taking off.
Yeah.
But it is difficult, because you're always thinking, oh, it's just around the corner. And, oh, now we got 2 customers. We're gonna get some more. I mean, yeah, it is hard. That part of being a startup and an entrepreneur to try things, but if you can accelerate that process and try and do it as quickly as possible, and also just accept that takes time. Go and talk to those people. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone or write an email to someone you don't really know, because very often they'll actually be quite interested in talking to you, and you might learn something at an early stage that it could have taken you months to find out. But I mean, yeah, that's part of any startup, I think. And I mean, I think also just something that's out there today that wasn't there when we started 20 years ago. It's just amazing how many good things there are. There's something called the Marketplace Conference. There's these big venture capitalists like NFX and A16Z and even Benchmark. They have lots of podcasts and blogs about this kind of stuff. I mean, in the end, it's a marketplace. Maybe go to the JobBoard Connect conference or RecBus or something like that if you can afford it, and try and learn about what these different questions are before you throw your money or your time after something. But it's in this no-code AI days, it's probably easier to launch something than it's ever been. So
It's true.
if you have access to a specific niche audience industry, then you the chance of being able to try it out is actually real. You can do that without sinking a lot of money into it.
Excellent.
Which means more competition, but the prize goes to the ones who can define it well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lars, what a fantastic few pieces of advice. Absolutely. Make sure you've got access, know what you're getting yourself into, and test the market before you spend too much money. Absolutely love those pieces of advice. Lars, it's been ridiculously interesting and brilliant to speak to you today. And thank you so much for giving up your time to join me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for running an interesting blog that hopefully can help other people try and get this right. And it's I think the world of marketplaces is interesting. So it's been fun for us.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Lars.
Thank you.